Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Tom Koulopoulos on the show. Tom, excited to have you on the show.
Gresh, it is a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. The pleasure is definitely all ours. And before, of course, we jump in, I want to read a little bit more about Tom so you can hear about some of those awesome things that he's doing. And Tom is chairman and founder of Delphi Group, a 30-year-old Boston-based think tank named one of the fastest growing private companies by Inc. magazine, and the founding partner of AcroVantage Ventures, which invests in early stage technology startups. He is also the author of 14 books, an inventor with several patents, and Inc.com columnist, the past executive director of the Babson College Center for Business Innovation, the past director of the Dell Innovation Lab, and a professor at Boston University. His insights have been received wide praise from luminaries such as the late Peter Drucker, the father of modern management, Dee Hawk, the founder of Visa International, and Tom Peters, who called his writing a brilliant vision of where we must take our enterprises to survive and thrive. His Inc. column is read by over 1 million people every year, and Tom's 14 books include Reimagining Healthcare, Revealing the Invisible, The Gen Z Effect, The Innovation Zone, and Cloud Surfing. His latest book, GigaTrends, looks at the 6 tech trends that are shaping the future of how we live, work, and play. And he said this in the video when I was preparing for this, which really stuck with me, what Tom actually does. He says, what I give more people more than anything else, I think, is a lens through which they can see what they do day in and day out in a slightly different way. And it's so powerful to be able to understand like how we can kind of change our perspective. And it doesn't necessarily change our world, but the way that we interact in that world. So I love that you do that, Tom. Excited to have you on the podcast. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I am absolutely ready to go. And thank you for that. I think that notion of looking at life through a slightly different lens is so important because we get stuck, on tracks. And it's just human nature. We keep on looking at things the same way and we see the same things. And if you look at them differently, you see different things. So, yeah, very cool way to begin, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so powerful, I think, especially with everything you've been writing and doing. And I think so many times we get mired in and focused on like how we're operating through life. But
Right.
I guess, just to speak to that, I wanted to rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on your life. What led you to get started with all the awesome work you're doing?
Yeah. So, look, at the end of the day, I think I am just a very curious person. I like to learn. I love to grow, and I love to surround myself with people who similarly enjoy learning about things that they don't know. And that stretches you. It's painful sometimes. It hurts to learn. As we get older, it hurts more, I think. Think about learning how to play a musical instrument. When you're 3 years old, you can play the violin, you can play the piano, you can play the guitar. Your mind is a sponge. As we get older, it's tougher and tougher to rewire. So I think we have to sort of constantly challenge ourselves. And I love doing that to myself, challenging myself to learn new things and to explore new dimensions of life that maybe otherwise I wouldn't, left to my own devices. We all get a little bit lazy. So I love to
Mhm.
push myself. I love to have people around me that push me and force me to learn.
Yeah, that ends up being so powerful to be able to kind of understand that and understand how powerful that is, but also how powerful having those people around you, that environment, so
Yeah.
that you can, create opportunities for you to do that.
Absolutely. I think, we often surround ourselves with people that allow us to kind of slip into what's comfortable.
Mhm.
And while it's nice to have people that you can be comfortable with, I think it's so important to have people that really are going to challenge you, constantly push you. I know you've got a son. My son is now 24. He has
Mhm.
forever pushed the envelope with me. And I'm so grateful for the fact that he has challenged me and taken me to task and forced me to see things through his lens, through his eyes, which are so different than mine. And at first, as a parent, you want to believe you know everything. And you want to
Mhm.
push back and say, wait, I've got the wisdom. Listen to me. My son once said to me, Gresh, get this. He said to me, after I gave him some advice, he said, Dad, you've only taken one path through life, your path. There were infinite other paths you could have taken. And it kind of stopped me to, I stopped. I froze in my tracks. I said, you know what, Adam, you're right. There are infinite other paths. So we can get educated by all kinds of people, including our own children, many times. And it's good to be challenged. It's good to be challenged.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where that opportunity to grow comes from, that you talked about, getting outside of your comfort zone, sometimes seeing things in a different way. That word infinite really stuck with me because I think once we realize once we realize that there's different ways to see the world and even different paths to the world, I think it becomes, you start to tap into that curiosity of starting to not just see what people are doing, but why are they doing it? Just
Right.
imagine like a lot of things happen from there.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to believe, I think we all want to believe that there are these universal truths. And while there are some universal truths, the fact is that most of the stuff that we think about as being immutable is a matter of the culture we grew up in, the family we grew up in, the society, the neighborhood we grew up in. And there are so many things for which there are multiple truths, depending on how your culture, your family, your society looks at the world. And you have to be open minded and accept. It's a difficult thing to accept, but accept that there are multiple truths for many things. And as you said, why do people believe in their truth? And that's what tolerance is all about. Tolerance is about trying to open up your mind to someone else's perspective and believe that they see things not maliciously, but genuinely different than
Mhm.
you do. And I wish we had more of that in the world. Like we certainly could use a bit more of that these days.
Yeah, no question. That, tolerance, it was mixed with the empathy as well too, and just the understanding and awareness. And I think, a lot of organizations, especially once you start to see that people look at things differently in a different world, it ends up becoming part or can become part of your superpower, your opportunity to be able to
Yeah.
leverage that and probably minimize a lot of the blind spots and vulnerabilities you might have within organizations, I imagine.
So true, and it's you're right, and it's organizational too, right? When we wrote the book GigaTrends, we took a
Hmm.
very human approach to the book. We wanted to look at how AI is going to up our game as humans, how it's going to make us more human. And often the conversation is machine versus human. And we
Hmm.
just don't see it that way. AI is a technology tool like all other tools. And if you think about it, 200 years ago, we were all toiling in the field. We were all doing
Hmm.
manual labor, working at looms and factories and what have you. No one wants to do that ultimately for a living. We don't want to work 14 hours a day at a loom. So technology ups the human game. It comes with a cost. It creates disruption, but AI is going to make us much more human. And I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of folks to embrace and understand. But that is where the optimism comes from. To me, any technology that allows me to do more of what I love to do, allows me to create more value, more joy in my life, to experience more of life is a good technology. And that is ultimately, I think, what AI is going to do for us. So it's a very different perspective that we have in the book Gigatrends than a lot of the other gloom and doom kind of perspectives around AI that pit us against the machine.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, and I love that phrase, "make us more human," because I think so many times when we think of technologies, I think most people start to kind of clasp on to what they have or what they're doing,
Right?
and not realize that there's more opportunities. But I feel like that speaks directly to kind of an abundant mentality,
Yeah.
where so many times we're thinking either or, but it's not either or. It's actually both, and a lot of times better if we start to compensate or to take on a lot of these technologies and these innovations that are happening.
Yeah, we are. I love that word abundance. We are really moving from an era of scarcity to one of abundance. And it's an interesting term because abundance doesn't mean that we're going to, mine more iron ore from the ground and pollute the waters more and create a greater climate crisis. Abundance simply means that we'll have more opportunities as human
Mhm.
beings to experience life and to experience the world. Um, Scarcity is, look, I work 12 hours a day. I don't have enough time to be with my kids. I don't have enough time to enjoy life. That's scarcity. Scarcity is zero sum. I only have one bucket and it's finite. Abundance is, innovation is infinite. The capacity of our minds is infinite. Our capacity to experience life is truly infinite. And this sounds a bit spiritual. It's not meant to go into that fuzzy spiritual realm, although I think there's a lot of value there as well. It's a
Mhm.
very simple statement that says, look, don't live your life as though you only got a few hours a day or a few weeks during the course of the year to enjoy it. Live life in a way that you truly can feel fulfilled. Remote work, on the one hand, it feels like we're working 24/7. But on the other hand, if I'm at home, I can get up, I can play with my dog, I can, take a break and talk to my kids. I can do things that I couldn't do when I was in the office. That all is part of this sort of spirit and this era of abundance that I think we're entering. Does it sound Pollyannish? To some, it might, but it's a long-term trajectory. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year. It's a long-term trajectory that we're on, and I think it's a good trajectory because it does give us the ability as human beings to be more fulfilled in whatever it is that we want to do with our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And you used the word earlier, rewire, and I was thinking even reframing some of the
Yeah.
ways that we're going through our life, going through our business, and all those aspects. I think there's been obviously a lot of adjustments and changes that we have had and are going through, and probably will continue to go through. So a lot of times it's just like how we're looking at those things. So I love that you kind of tap into that with this new book. And of course, I imagine a lot of the books and things that you've written, you've started to help people to look at things in a different and more maybe holistic. I don't know if that's the right word,
It's a
but
good
way.
word. I think it's a good
Yeah,
word. I think it's a
yeah.
good word. I when I wrote my, my ink column, I began writing that years and years ago, and I always tell people it was business advice guised in advice on how to live a life.
Mm,
The lessons that I was trying to get across were life lessons, not just business lessons. And the two often overlap, especially if you're an entrepreneur. I mean, life and business are one and the same. Um, so yeah, I think that taking a more holistic approach is always a good thing. And I tell people, look, when you think of your life, don't think about what you'll be doing, because what you'll be doing will change. I doubt that you knew you'd be doing what you're doing right now,
mhm,
10, 20 years ago. I didn't know that I'd be doing what I'm doing right now, but I knew what it would feel like. And this
mm,
notion of what it feels like is a constant theme that I've often come across. If we think about our past, we may not remember what we were doing in a certain moment, but we remember what that part of our life felt like. So think about what your life wants to feel like and try to do things that will enhance your life so that it does feel that way. Because what you'll be doing will change. None of us can predict our future that accurately, but we can try to create a future that feels right for us. So, again, we're getting a little bit off the beaten track here, but I think these are important things to keep in mind, especially for entrepreneurs who are trying to build businesses, and these businesses can be all consuming. And you've got to be careful with that, because at the end of the day, what you're trying to build is a life, not just a business, right?
yeah, and it makes so much sense. I always say we forget about the human aspect of business or the human aspect of life at that, and realize it's not either or. Again, it's both. And a lot of the silos that were within our lives or within organizations no longer or they don't exist to the level at least
Right.
that they used to. They're everything's interconnected, and that human part goes through every single part of it. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more, hear a little bit more about your latest book, GigaTrends. Can you
Sure.
take us through a little bit more on what we can find there and how you're helping us to think differently, of course, probably live differently as well?
Well, GigaTrends caused me to think differently. I wrote the book with my co-author, Nathaniel Palmer. He and I sat down and we asked the question one day, what is most going to change to create the future for our children? He has two children, I have two children.
Mhm,
And we rolled up our sleeves and tried to create a list of all the things that would most impact our children's lives. And we came up with a list of like 24 different things. We said, well, this is a lot. Can we boil
mhm,
this down? And we ended up with these 6 trends that I think are most going to shape the world, our future, and the future of our children and our children's children. And they looked at the changing nature of population. We're all getting older as a globe. That's going to create a very different society. It's going to change social welfare, healthcare, education, agriculture. All these will be affected by that. We looked at healthcare, which is not just a US crisis, it's a global crisis. And in 10 years, there's not a single healthcare system that we looked at across the globe that's going to survive intact the way it is now. So we have to change healthcare radically. And those two are very related. As we get older, we have more complex health problems, right? So healthcare is going to get more
mhm,
complex just as a result of that. Look at transportation, how that's going to change, autonomous vehicles, electric cars, what that means. Look at identity. 4 billion people out of the 8 billion people on the planet today live on less than $7 a day. They have no identity, no bank accounts, no credit cards.
mhm,
They're taken advantage of constantly. As we bring those people into the mainstream, what's going to happen? We're going to choke the planet from just an ecological standpoint. So we have to use technology to give them identity, give them the ability to enter the economic mainstream. Look at the future of things. Everything's becoming digital. Your biggest asset will be your digital self. What does that mean? What does that mean for politics?
mhm,
Not to get political here, but think
mhm,
about it. I think that the AI gives you personal liberty because AI creates transparency. If a
mhm,
bill goes through Congress and it has 3,000 pages, there's no way I can understand it.
mhm,
There's no way I can make sense of it. I don't know how to take a stand on it, but I could use AI to help interpret that bill for me and tell me what does it mean to me. So creating transparency in government, creating transparency in policy, in the legal system, in the justice system. So it's an array of things that fell into what we thought were 6 very neat buckets that would most affect and impact the world going forward. Of course, climate change is part of that. Energy is part of that. Um, but we tried to take a very scientific look. We did a lot of research at how these trends are going to evolve and what it means to us. And we call them gigatrends because giga is sort of the tech term for billions. So
mhm,
gigatrends are trends that are going to affect billions of lives. The radio affected billions of lives. The Industrial Revolution affected billions of lives. Advances in agriculture affected billions of lives. So these are gigatrends that are going to impact billions across the globe. It's a very big look at a bunch of very big topics.
Yeah, and it seems extremely powerful again, like going back to what we talked about, like thinking about things differently. And I think a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs, business owners are really trying to, understand exactly like what's happening with the world. And I feel like I appreciate you, of course, breaking those things down, but of course, in the book, being able to kind of understand a lot of what could be happening or what at least has been trending allows you, I think, to make not guaranteed decision making, but probably highly more likely to happen decision making if you have that information and knowledge.
And that's what decisions always come down to. What's the most likely scenario,
Mhm.
right? Where do I place my bets? There are no guarantees here. As we've seen over the course of the last year, the world can quickly change and shift on a dime, and we often don't see these changes coming. So the best we can do when it comes to planning for the future is place our bets on what's likely, what's probable, and what we're trying to do with GigaTrends is give people a compass setting. That this is the direction that we're going in. Exactly how we're going to get there, we're going to zigzag. If you're a sailor, we're going to tack and we're going to jibe. We're going to, when it's not a straight line, the future never is, but at least give us a compass setting that we can use to make decisions about our businesses, about our lives, about our investments. And I think we did a pretty damn good job of at least giving them that compass setting, if not the roadmap. I like to call it a roadmap because it sounds colloquial, it sounds good, but this is not Waze, right? It's not going to plot every turn for you. It's not going to tell you exactly what time you're going to get there to the second. It's a compass setting that helps you look into the future. It's a little bit farther than you may have been able to otherwise.
Yeah, but I think that's so huge to be able to kind of understand that because I think if you do are looking at something that is quote unquote ways and it's telling you to turn this way and that way and that way and this way, I feel like that doesn't allow kind of space for that opportunity where that we talked about it to be able to look at things in a different way, to innovate, to be able to say, hey, why don't we go down that aisle instead of
Yeah.
down this driveway or whatever that decision may be? Because I think that's where a lot of the innovation opportunity and room for improvement could come from.
What a great point you just made, Gresh. I love this, and I'm gonna use your analogy going forward. I love this because the problem with Waze is it takes me down a path that I haven't decided on. It takes away my personal liberty. And
Hmm.
stop and think about this. Not to take the analogy to absurd extremes, but how many times have you just been driving around, not knowing where you're going, and you come across something pretty cool, pretty interesting that you
Yeah.
wouldn't come across otherwise? And I think there's an element of how we live our lives that needs that serendipity. Great things happen to us when we're not expecting them, when we don't go down the beaten path, when we don't go down the path that we think we should be going down, and somehow life takes us down a different path. And we look back and we say, you know what? I'm really glad I took that turn in the road that I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting to take. So, yeah, to take that Waze analogy to a bit of an extreme, I think it's nice to have that personal liberty and authority and agency to make my own decisions. And sometimes those decisions take me in directions that I really did not expect to go in, but I'm glad I went in those directions at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It kind of gave me, thoughts of Steve Jobs' commencement speech where he talked about the dots, and a lot of times you
Yeah.
can't connect the dots looking forward. You connect them looking backwards, and realize that turn that you're like, oh, I don't want to go that way, or I shouldn't have went that way, ends up opening up a whole different opportunity that we never would have thought of.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that Stanford commencement speech that Jobs gave. I've watched it over and over again. I think it was one of the most authentic moments in his life. A
Mhm.
lot of wonderful advice and advice from a person who had faced mortality and
Mhm.
realized that, at the this is a zero sum game in terms of the amount of time that we're given. It is not infinite, and we live our lives as though it was, but it's not. We have a certain amount of time, and we should use it to do those things that we most want to hold our feet to the fire. So can I share with you? People talk about bucket lists.
Yeah, go
I
for
have a thing I call, so replace the B with an F.
it.
And that's I have my F. My F list is those things that I will never forgive myself for not doing. And I think all of
Mhm.
us have an F list, right? What will you not forgive yourself for not having done in this life? And I know you because I've talked to you a little bit. Your
Mhm.
son, you wouldn't forgive yourself for not having raised that child in the best possible way and given him the opportunities that you want to give him, and not having a loving relationship with him. That's an F list item, right? What are the things that you will never
Mhm.
forgive yourself for? Don't have to be too many of them. I'm okay not climbing Mount Everest, but there are things that I'm not going to be okay with, and I think we have to list those things down and make sure we hold our feet to the fire on those things. One of the things that I would never forgive myself for is writing a book that's not an optimistic book.
Mhm.
I want to share my optimism. I want it to be grounded. I want to make a case for that optimism. I don't want to be naive in it. But I want to spread optimism, not pessimism. And that, to tie this back to the book, not to contrive it, but a lot of folks looked at the book and said, "Wow, this is such an optimistic view of the future." Yes, exactly. Because I think that's the way we have to approach the future, realistically, but with an eye towards optimism. The arc of the future is long, but it leans towards, I think, the better, not the worse.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I almost wonder if that's part of what I would like to call your secret sauce. Could be for yourself, the book, or a combination of both. It's kind of that thing that sets you apart and makes you unique. And initially, I was thinking it was a lot of that curiosity, but I think that might be a strong part of it. But I also wonder too if it's that optimism that you talked about, but also maybe awareness of like being able to see the forest for the trees, understand why we're doing the things that we're doing, that human
Yeah.
part that we talked about. Do you think that maybe blend of those things is a part of your secret sauce?
It's a really good observation. The way I describe it is that I'm a very simple minded person, although I've lived my life in technology and in very complex things like healthcare. I'm very simple minded, and I like to boil things down to their essence, because once I do that, then I can understand. I'm not lost in the complexity. I'm not lost in the forest. I can see the path forward much more clearly, and then I can share that with others.
Mhm.
So making things simple for myself so that I can understand them allows me to then share those very complicated ideas with others. And I think when things are complex, we feel overwhelmed. We become
Mhm.
pessimists because we it's daunting. We don't know how to approach the future. It's daunting. And my objective is, let's not make it daunting. Let's make it simple. And by making it simple, we can breathe a sigh of relief, and then we can be optimists. We don't feel overwhelmed by the weight of the future. And so, yeah, it's an interesting observation that you just made, and I thank you for it, because I believe that, above all else, I am incredibly optimistic about the future, whatever challenges we might currently be facing.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think there's a quote that says like the true show of mastery and excellence is to be able to have the power of simplifying those things. So I love that you've taken on that long path of being able to kind of understand these complex things and be able to kind of understand them simply for yourself, but also be able to communicate that so well in all the awesome ways you've been able to do that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I was given the gift of having a mind that can take the path into complexity, but
Mhm.
ultimately, my mind is a simple one, and I come out of that complexity with what I think are very basic cornerstones. And if I can do that, then that's a gift that I can hopefully take to others, and that's why I write. I write to do precisely that. So yeah, thank you for the observation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit
Sure.
and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be
Mhm.
like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
I think the biggest challenge as a CEO is decision making. And what
Mhm.
I've seen, before we get to the hack, what I've seen in ineffective leaders is an inability to make decisions. They want to come to consensus. They want to be democratic. They want to constantly engage and involve everyone in the conversation. That's wonderful in its essence, but it can also slow things down tremendously. The best advice I ever got was, when it comes to the point where you have to make a decision, make it, because good or bad, any decision is better than no decision. And that's ultimately what you're faced with as a CEO. Are you at a point, at a juncture, where you either have to make a decision and live with it, or live with indecision? Indecision is never the preferred path. So my suggestion, my hack, if you will, is to get comfortable with yourself and your ability not just to make decisions, but to live with their consequences.
Mhm.
Um, to own those consequences. So I will make the decision as a CEO, and I will own the better or the worse outcome. But I have ownership over this, and I will take the feedback. I will take the inputs from everyone. My mentor, Peter Drucker, who you mentioned in the introduction, an amazing human being, he used to say to me often, because he worked with presidents, he actually worked with folks like Eisenhower. I mean, can you imagine that, right? And
Mhm.
he would say to me, "Look, at the end of the day, the great leaders will take the input, and then they will make the decision, and they will
Mhm.
live with that decision. And what makes a great leader is that they have followers, because the followers want to see that path clearly. They want to know
Mhm.
what that future will look like, and a leader can give you, if not a prediction of the future, the assurance that in their mind, this is the right path. And we all want that. We want those assurances. So that's my hack. Get comfortable with making decisions and live with the consequences, own those consequences. And many of them will be bad. Some of them will be good. And you hope at the end of the day, the good outweigh the bad. And that will be your ultimate test of leadership, but never shirk from the decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so powerful in realizing that a lot of what we see and what we have in our lives is a amalgamation, I guess, of decisions and the buildup of the decisions that we made or
Right?
sometimes don't make. But it's so powerful, that hacked, because I think so many times we can get kind of lost in the sauce and get bogged down with so much data and so much information that we forget why we were taking in that information, which is to
Right.
make that decision. And we have to ultimately do that.
Exactly. That's what life is nothing more than a series of decision points. And
Yeah.
again, they won't all be good. I mean, don't hold
Right.
yourself to that standard. The standard that you hold yourself to is, am I making decisions or am I not? Time will tell if you're a good leader. It will you will find out soon enough if you're a good leader, but never shirk from the decision.
Yeah, and I think there's such a misconception around decisions that people that are quote unquote successful in however we define it have made nothing but perfect decisions and great decisions. In reality, they haven't, and a lot of times they pivoted or changed or done so many things. And so many of the tech startups that you hear that weren't started with what we now know they are is amazing to kind of hear and see that journey. So that's why I love that hack, because I think it provides a lot more awareness around what actually happens through that journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. Take what you're given and do that. I mean, like you talked about Jobs. I mean, Jobs took what he was given and he did the best with it. It was pretty damn amazing what he did with it.
Hmm.
And you can't tell me there weren't detours on the way. I mean, there
Yeah.
were detours that should have been fatal in his
Mhm.
case. So take what you're given, do the best with it, and keep moving forward. But it's the only path you've got. I mean,
Yeah.
the only path we have is moving forward.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely. So, what would you consider to be a little bit more of what I call a CEO nugget? You might have already touched on this. This is a little bit more word of wisdom or piece of advice.
yeah.
I like to say it might be something you would tell your favorite client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Ooh, I love the time machine piece of that, right?
Mhm.
Look, I think the nugget would be surround yourself with people who will challenge you.
Mm.
As a CEO, you want to believe you have ultimate authority. You do to some degree. Again, you are the decision maker, but don't shirk. Don't be afraid of the people that will challenge you. In my experience, there are two categories of people that have been most important in my life: the people who have challenged me and those who have opened doors for me.
Mhm.
And both have done it, I think, from the depths of their soul. The folks who
Mhm.
opened doors for me didn't need to, but they did anyway. They were gracious enough to open a door for me, and I walked through it, and it allowed me to experience an enormous opportunity. Those who have challenged me did very much the same. They opened up doors for me as well, doors in my own mind that I had closed. So allow yourself to be challenged, and don't surround yourself with people that are simply going to follow and take your lead. Surround yourself with people who are truly going to challenge your ideas, your directions, your vision, because that is how you temper yourself as a leader. And by temper, I mean temper the way you temper a sword, right? A samurai sword is
Mhm.
tempered in heat. Um, and it is that process of going through that tempering that ultimately, I think, results in true leadership. Those are the folks that are able to do that who end up being the greatest leaders. It doesn't mean that being challenged is going to change your point of view necessarily, but it'll allow you to refine it. It'll allow you to pivot. I've yet to see a company, a successful company, that has not pivoted multiple times. The
Mhm.
vision of the leader, of the partners, of the founders is rarely where that company ends up. And I
Mhm.
challenge anyone to give me a company that hasn't gone through multiple of those pivots and succeeded. Um, so that pivoting requires that you take on those challenges, that you see them clearly, you allow yourself to be challenged, and then you make the right accommodations as a result of that. I think that's the nugget is make sure that you don't surround yourself with people who are always going to just agree, but people who are going to truly take you to task on your ideas and your vision and your concepts. And it's important.
Yeah, it's huge, and to be able to kind of understand like how both of those people that you mentioned have opened doors in different ways, and but done that in such a way. It kind of reminded me of the quote of "There no pressure, no diamonds." And when
Yeah,
you have that pressure, even if it's the challenges that we go through or challenges that sometimes people around us put us through, that only makes us sparkle more and only makes us a lot more aligned with where we need to be and to be better leaders and to be better CEOs, whatever,
Right.
the title might be. At the end of the day, those challenges don't necessarily break us. They actually, I think, create a better, stronger, and even more impactful organization or even people within that organization.
Well, so I couldn't agree more with you. Here's the way I often look at it is you are not the
Mhm.
custodian of your ego. You are the custodian of your ideas, of your organization, of the vision. And your responsibility is not to yourself, not to make yourself feel like the leader, like the CEO. Your responsibility is to be the custodian of those ideas and to shepherd them forward in the best possible way. To believe that only you are able to provide the input to do that is supreme arrogance. It is foolish
Mhm.
arrogance. The ideas will be reshaped, they'll be refined, they'll be redefined, they'll be reframed, myriad ways, and that will not come just from you and from your ego. So you are the custodian of the ideas, the custodian of the organization. That's your primary responsibility. You are not the custodian of your ego. Let your ego
Mm.
be hurt, let it be bruised, whatever it needs to be, but ultimately, the ideas are the ones that will benefit. And if the ego takes a hit along the way, so be it. Suck it up and keep going forward. What you want to succeed is the idea, not the ego. Right.
Yeah, I love that you brought that ego part, up because I think so many times I say it's like a balance beam. You want to have the ego to sometimes think that you can, do something, you can make an impact, make the world bigger and better. But at the same time, that ego can be your downfall if you allow it to overtake and say, "Hey, I'm the one that's in charge. We're going to do what I'm going to do. I'm not going to listen to
Right.
these potential perspectives that you have, the conflict, all those things that can actually help you to do what you ultimately wanted to do in the
Right.
very beginning, which is to make that impact."
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a fast leadership is a fascinating journey. Um, and I think that any of us who could peer into the future and see how difficult of a journey it is might not take it. It's kind of like parenting, right? I mean, if you
Yeah.
knew all the things, all the pain, the heartache that would come with it, you might not take the journey. So it's a good thing that we don't know how
Yeah.
difficult it's going to be. But look, but I don't think I'd want to take any other journey. Looking back, it allows for enormous growth. It comes with a lot of responsibility, a lot of pain, but it also, I think, has enormous upside that I would never have wanted to let go of.
Yeah, absolutely. That naivete sometimes is one of the best things because you don't know what you don't know,
Right?
and when you get into it, you just figure out how to get through it. If you did know,
Exactly.
you wouldn't even want to have any parts of it. So I almost wonder, is that your definition of what I like to call being a CEO? Where our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So is that custodian of ideas? Do you feel like that's how you would define being a CEO?
Absolutely. You are the custodian of the ideas. You are the custodian of the vision of the organization, and your responsibility is to do everything that you can to see the fulfillment and the success of those ideas. You are secondary, which is a tough thing for a CEO to embrace. You are secondary to that priority. So how you are perceived, how you are thought of, how you are measured by others is secondary to that. And again, look, over time, uh, whether the decisions you've made, whether the ways that your ego has influenced those decisions, whether the pivots are correct or incorrect, it'll be proven by the marketplace. It's that
Mhm.
simple. Uh, so pick yourself back up every time that it doesn't go your way, and keep moving forward. And it could be with a different idea. It could be with a different vision. Um, but but yeah, I think being the custodian of the ideas is the best way to define leadership and take yourself out of the equation. You are not the priority. It is the ideas, it is the organization that is the priority.
Yeah, that ends up being so powerful. And I love that phrase, do everything that you can, because I think sometimes we don't realize doing everything you can include kind of stomping on your own ego so that the ideas, the impact, the organization, whatever it is that you're doing the thing for will impact and live beyond like what you're feeling or what you want and those things like that. And I think that it's an incredible
Yeah,
show of leadership when you're able to make that happen.
yeah. There's no doubt. And I can apply that to so many things in life. I mean, if you're um, again writing books, the obligation is to the book, and making those ideas in the book take life, and a lot of times they take life in ways that you didn't expect them to. um, so
Mhm.
again, it is, I don't want to keep on coming back to this, but I think ego can be a very dangerous thing. when we're not serving the purpose of the idea, but serving our own purpose, our own selfish purposes. Now, look, it doesn't mean that you can't be successful in growing an organization or in writing a book or any of these things. This doesn't mean that it doesn't feed the ego a little bit. I'd be totally naive to say that I don't feel good when people read my book and come back to me and say, it was wonderful and I enjoyed it. But it's the ideas that they're enjoying. It's not me. And that is the
Mm.
separation that's so critical to make. You are enjoying the ideas in the book, you are enjoying the research, the conclusions that you've drawn. It's not me that you're enjoying. It's a tough thing to separate. But once you do, it's amazing how fulfilling the process can be, because it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ends up being, like you said, that was sometimes the most exciting part. But I think it even goes back to what you talked about as far as like creating that environment, those people around you that are challenging
Right.
you. Because I think when that ego does take over those ideas, a lot of times we have those checks and balances in place to make sure that we are ultimately doing what we even set out at the beginnings to do.
Well, and that, by the way, again, to take this a bit full circle, that
Hmm.
is the thing about AI. We think AI threatens our ego. Boy, it's
Mm.
going to be smarter than we are. It'll be more intelligent
Mm.
than we are. Well, hold on a second. Is that all you're made up of? Are you just a bunch of neurons that are firing in random sequence and occasionally making sense out of the world? Is that you just a pattern matching engine? No, Einstein was not just a pattern matching engine. Einstein came up with these brilliant ideas that were quantum leaps of intellect, well beyond what any AI could possibly do. When Watson and Crick discovered the double helix DNA, my goodness, that wasn't just connecting the dots. That was taking a leap into the unknown, into suggesting something that was completely a different framework, a way to rethink the world. So, as a human being, you have enormous capacity, and that's part of the point we're making in the book. To be more human means to exploit that capacity. And if you give
Mm.
me a tool by which I can do that, are you kidding? I mean, any day of the week, I'll take that too. There's a wonderful Hollywood trope that has someone, there's been a bunch of movies around this, takes a pill, and that pill allows them to take their 10% of their brain that we are, told we use typically, and now they can use
Mhm.
90% of their brain. And by using 90% of their brain, they can change the world. They can do all kinds of crazy things that,
Mhm.
a superhero can do. That's what AI is. AI is that little
Mhm.
red pill, which if you pop it, suddenly you can now use 20, 30% of your brain. I don't believe the 10%, by the way. I think that's a bit of a myth, but it gives you that amplification. And that to me is amazing. I mean, who doesn't want to take that pill and be more powerful as a human? So don't diminish yourself to think that you are
Mm.
just, someone who tallies up spreadsheets and, writes an essay here and there or writes a book. You are much more than that. And AI will give you the ability to be so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. And that amplification ends up being such a huge thing when you're able to kind of understand that the power that you have, but also the power that technologies like AI have. And you can
Right.
marry those two
Yeah.
things together to do bigger and better
It's
things.
gonna it's
So,
gonna change the world. And I tell
mhm.
silly little anecdotes. I think my kids or their kids will look at automobiles and say, "Dear Lord, do you mean to tell me Grandpa actually let you drive one of these things? Was he crazy? At 16, at
Yeah.
17, you were driving a car, a death
Yeah.
machine." I mean, any day of the week, give me an autonomous vehicle for a 16-year-old versus a 16-year-old driving that same vehicle. I'll take it.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly, and it's so funny we do that on a regular basis when we start to look at our elders, so to speak, and see, like, "Really, did you do that?" But it's
Right.
hard to believe that there our kids, and kids are gonna be doing the exact same thing,
Yeah, my
to
mom
what
let
we
me
have.
go out on my Schwinn Stingray without a helmet on, no knee pads, and drive in the middle of traffic. And God, I'm still here to talk about it. I'm one of the lucky ones that's still here to talk about it, right? Yeah, it's gonna be a much safer world because of AI as well. And look, again, there'll be downside. I'm not naive. No
Mhm.
technology is simply an upside. It all comes with its liabilities, but the positives will far outweigh the liabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, truly appreciate your time and all the awesome things that you're doing. What I wanted to do now was pass you the mic, so to speak, just see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best people can get a hold of you, get a copy of the books, find out about all the awesome things that you're working on.
Well, so GigaTrends.io is the website. You can certainly get GigaTrends on Amazon or in any bookstore. They can reach out to me directly through GigaTrends.io. There's a form on there. They can reach out to me or my co-author, Nathaniel Palmer. We love to communicate with readers and have chats about these ideas, because there's always more to learn and more to talk about. My personal website is tkspeaks.com. I'd love to connect with people on that website as well. A lot about me and what I'm involved in lately. This is a great show, and I know you've got a lot of folks out there who are aspiring to be CEOs or currently CEOs. And my best advice is take all advice and take it all with a grain of
Mm,
salt, because your path, as my son, is your unique, as my son said, is your unique path. And have confidence in your ability to inspire others, and do what you can to be a good custodian, good shepherd of those ideas and that vision. And ultimately, the greatest joy you will have as a CEO is having other people come back to you years in the future to say, you know what, that was a hell of a ride. That was a
mhm.
great time in my life. And it's okay to take a little bit of accountability for the fact that you were a player in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Get the opportunity to kind of celebrate those wins. And I
That's
think
right.
I love how everything comes full circle so that we understand exactly why we're doing the things that we're doing. So obviously we're gonna have the links and information as well in the show notes as well too, so that everybody can follow up with you. But truly appreciate you for taking time out. Appreciate all the awesome things that you're doing. And I think what really resonated with me was the idea of being more human, and even that as we understand what being more human is, we may not have a full understanding of what that is and what that looks like. Sometimes we can peg ourselves into, oh, just being human is making decisions or doing all those things. But creating those innovations, being able to kind of take all that information allows us to realize that it's not either or again, it's both and better. We can use these technologies, we can marry it with our human element, what truly is human, and then make the world a better and impactful place. So thank you so much for doing that. And of course, taking time out with us today. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
That's well said. Thank you very much, Gresh. It was a pleasure to be here with you.